This series includes discussions of sensitive topics, including transphobia, homophobia, sexual violence, and drug use. Listener discretion is advised.
This is Detective David Jensen with Vancouver Police, and the date is October 2nd, 2019. A time is 6:35 p.m.
It's been 4 months, almost to the day, since a teenage girl seemingly disappeared from her hometown of Vancouver, Washington.
Were you aware that this is recording?
Yep.
Do I have your consent to record this conversation?
Yep.
Okay, also with me is...
This is the first time detectives are getting to talk to the man they believe was the last person to see 17-year-old Nikki Kuhnhausen. It's been a game of cat and mouse, just getting him here to answer questions.
Do you have any idea why?
Well,
I'm asking you.
I was told missing persons case.
Okay.
That's it. But I did run across this person just once. I saw her walking. I walked up to her. I asked her, why is she walking alone in the middle of the night? And she said that she had some big fight with her boyfriend, and she's really upset. And
These detectives have seen just about everything in their decades solving crimes. But this interview is frustrating. They know they have their suspect sitting right in front of them. They just don't have enough evidence to arrest him.
Did you guys drink anything together?
I did have vodka with me, and I offered some vodka for her.
Okay.
With no body and no proof of a crime, they hang on every last word the man says, hoping he trips up on his story.
Do you see why I want to talk to you?
I don't know what to tell you.
The interview goes on for almost an hour.
So you're the last person to ever see her?
They try hard,
I don't know.
but investigators just can't seem to get the man to give them anything. He sticks to his story, that he has no idea what happened to Nikki.
Last I saw of her was when I asked her to get out of the car, that's it. And that was just right there in the middle of the street.
See, that's not how people disappear. That's not how stuff happens to people. Getting out of the car and walking away is not how people disappear. So what do you think happened to her?
I have no idea.
Is she alive?
I don't know.
By now, they're exasperated and exhausted. The detectives finally decide to call it a night, and all they can do is watch as their main suspect walks out the door. I'm your host, Ashley Korslund. Welcome to Should Be Alive, a KGW original podcast. Episode 1 of 6, Into Thin Air. On a warm, sunny day in June of 2019, 4 months before that police interview, people fill Esther Short Park in downtown Vancouver, Washington, a city just across the Columbia River from Portland, Oregon. It's just days before the official start to summer. A bunch of kids excitedly skip around a playground during a game of tag. People walk by with their dogs, enjoying the town's farmers market. They sample locally produced honey and coffee and line up in front of tables to buy fresh-cut flowers and little trinkets. While families bask in the sunshine on this idyllic, easy Saturday morning, there's a small group of people on the fringe of the park. They're taping up flyers on streetlights and stop signs. They're missing posters of a local teenager who no one's heard from for several days. The flyers show 4 photos of a dark-haired 17-year-old. In large red letters plastered across the top of the page are the words, "Have you seen me?" Below, it lists the name Nikki Kuhnhausen, 5'8", 120 pounds, hazel eyes.
My name is Lyndon Walls, and I'm an activist and a local trans person. And pronouns, would you like me to use?
I use they, them pronouns.
Great.
Lyndon Walls, a local writer and content creator, had seen the group a few times around town, taping up flyers.
They had a large media outreach to have people spread the word that Nikki was missing. And so I saw them walking in downtown Vancouver. The flyering effort kind of was centered around the places that Nikki was most comfortable. So Esther Short, downtown, kind of expanding into the uptown region.
In the beginning, Lyndon didn't know much about Nikki, or really anything regarding the circumstances of her disappearance. It's not unusual for teens to go missing here from time to time. Statistically, most run away from home and eventually come back. But this felt different to Lyndon. The people trying to spearhead this grassroots search effort seemed to have a sense of urgency, and they were effective with their messaging. After seeing the posters around town, it didn't take long for Lyndon to see social media posts about Nikki too.
Post the same thing.
One after the next.
Duplicate.
The posts, shares, and comments kept coming.
An extensive amount of people who were posting about it, and so I was looking into it.
Many sharing the story were LGBTQ plus people. That's because Nikki was transgender.
Knowing that a trans female teenager was missing, those stories don't usually end very well, and so I was kind of keeping an eye on it from then.
Lyndon was painfully aware of societal judgments and especially the alarming increase in recent acts of violence against the trans community.
About deadly attacks against transgender Americans.
Headlines around the United States were actively pointing to an epidemic of violence, with 2018 being the worst for deadly assaults against transgender Americans.
The most ever recorded in a year.
The year before was the previous deadliest on record, with at least 29 transgender people murdered, according to the Human Rights Campaign.
These are the faces of trans women of color who were all murdered in cold blood.
Just as Nikki Kuhnhausen's name was cycling around the internet in the Pacific Northwest in 2019, advocates in Jacksonville, Florida, feared a string of transgender murders was the work of a serial killer.
A lot of the people in the LGBTQ community are on edge.
Do you think there's a serial murderer out there?
It raises a lot of concern.
Concern that's only gotten worse after another transgender woman was found dead at this motel in Bay Meadows Sunday afternoon.
Although no one knew yet if Nikki Kuhnhausen's gender identity played a role in her disappearance, Lyndon Walls couldn't shake that uneasy feeling that it had, and that something terrible had happened to the teenager. While the investigation into her daughter's disappearance unfolded behind the scenes, Lisa Woods was struggling intensely with her grief. Nikki had been listed on the website for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and advocates surrounded Lisa as she watched news coverage about Nikki begin to fade before her eyes. Lisa felt like she was screaming into a black hole, and no one could hear her cries for help. Life seemed to keep on moving for everyone but her.
The 2019 Vancouver Fireworks Spectacular.
By the 4th of July, Nikki's disappearance had almost seemed like an afterthought to thousands of people who flocked to watch the town's beloved fireworks show at the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site. Families held tightly to one another, their faces illuminated in a rainbow of colors as they gazed into the night sky. This Independence Day was 2 days before Nikki's 18th birthday, and almost 1 month to the day she went missing. On this day, Lisa Woods attempted suicide.
I went to a mental institution for a little while, and then to an adult family home because I couldn't be trusted with my pills.
After her suicide attempt, life came with a tidal wave of emotions. Each day that passed somehow moved fast and slow, all at the same time. Then, one morning, Lisa got a phone call that helped pull her from the fog of her deep depression. It was from Detective Dave Jensen.
I got a phone call from him saying that he was a very good detective and that I don't get to end this case until it's over, and that I need to be here for Nikki when he brings her home.
What was it like to have him tell you that
at that point in your life?
He was very stern, like a dad. He was very stern. And so I pinky promised him I wouldn't do that again.
Mm-hmm. In that moment, were you thinking, I want to be here for Nikki?
Yeah.
Did that reshape kind of how you looked at it?
Yeah, because he believed. And so I just fed from his belief, that she was going to come back to me.
Lisa prayed for that, day in and day out. Nikki was her everything.
She was my heart and soul.
You just had that special bond, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, and I looked at it like, she's going to have struggles in her life that are a little bit more challenging than our brothers. And so I had a tender spot in my heart for her. I wanted her to know that, I always had her back no matter what.
From an early age, Lisa says, it became apparent that Nikki's sex assigned at birth did not match her gender identity. Nikki knew who she was, and Lisa supported her.
I was super proud of her. I mean, she always wore my high heels. Then she would go to the daycare, and her favorite time was dress-up time. She'd be the first to put on the dress-up dress. And she just liked to dress up and have a tiara, and she was beautiful.
An old photograph of Nikki around age 3 or 4 shows her wearing a patriotic Olympics jersey with sparkly blue letters that read USA. Nikki is proudly wearing a tiara. As she got older, Nikki decorated her room in Hannah Montana posters. She and Lisa would spend their weekends talking about life and binging the show Vampire Diaries on the couch. Oftentimes, you could find Nikki practicing her catwalk around the house in Lisa's heels, as if she was starring in her own personal episode of America's Next Top Model. Around the age of 12, Nikki finally felt brave enough to wear a dress in public for the first time.
She had this beautiful white dress, and it was the first time she went out in public, and we took selfies up against a tree. She was very confident.
That must have been a proud moment for you, or was it kind of scary? Like, what was that, the emotions like of that?
I was super proud of her. I mean, she knew who she was, and we accepted her, her dad and I. She knew who she was from a very early age. I wasn't afraid for her, but also I wasn't aware of the hatred for transgenders. I was not educated on that.
Nikki's brother Alex, though,
I'm Alex Kuhnhausen,
would witness that hatred firsthand.
I'm Nikki's older brother.
It's a cold, drizzly December morning on Larch Mountain, the highest freestanding peak in Clark County, Washington, which on clear days boasts stunning views of nearby Mount St. Helens. But today, there are no picturesque vantage points atop the summit at Larch. A dense canopy of fir trees and a low cloud ceiling make it seem later in the day than it is. It feels as if night is setting in.
It was overcast. It was cold.
Members of Clark County Search and Rescue fan out about 30 feet down a rugged hillside.
The terrain was steep. The ground was muddy.
Scott Watkins and his teammates dig the tips of their hiking boots into the soupy ground, which squishes under the weight of their rubber soles. As they trudge upward, they wipe raindrops from their face.
There was a lot of vegetation, lots of rhododendron-type shrubbery, lots of vine maple.
They're carrying hedge trimmers and machetes to slice through jagged vegetation. A shrub called Devil's Club tears into Scott's gloves as he sweeps his hands over the ground. Tiny little spikes from the plant burrow into the arms of his jacket.
And they're just covered in these really fine, barbed hooks. And they grab your clothes and they cut your face and they get in your skin and they just hurt.
The searchers are just off a Forest Service road composed of mostly dirt and gravel. Their bright red uniform shirts are a sharp juxtaposition to the natural landscape around them. The glow of headlamps and flashlights illuminates the hidden underbrush of the forest.
In this situation, it was going to be easier for us to go uphill because we're going to be virtually on our hands and knees. So I can reach out on either side of me and touch the shoulder of the person next to me. So we're that close. And we're looking under pine needles and leaves and twigs and whatever. We're looking for some really tiny things like teeth and fingernails and earrings and buttons. And the longer it's been out there, the more it starts to take on the characteristics of its surroundings. So everything starts looking brown and tan and black and mossy green.
Scott and his team spread out even wider in a line, their bodies hunched over so much they're nearly hugging the wet slope beneath them.
So we would start, we're going ready on the right, and the person on the right would yell, ready on the right, ready on the left. People on the left would usually move the line. And so we would then start moving through the field.
As they inch forward, one of Scott's teammates yells out,
"Hold the line."
He's found something. It's a hip bone. And then,
"Hold the line."
A femur. In January of 2020, prosecutors Kristen Arnaud and Colin Hayes were assigned to represent the state in David Bogdanov's trial. Right away, they started debriefing with detectives on the case, doing as much research on the investigation as they could.
You know, when an arrest first comes in, they, of course, do a probable cause statement, or at least in this county, in this state, they do that. So that's, you know, a real quick blurb about what the case is. So you read that, talk to the detectives, and then, you know, as you find time, read through the reports as they come in.
Based on the evidence, prosecutors charged David with second-degree murder.
Because of the way the facts laid out, that we didn't know his story about how everything happened, we weren't able to charge murder in the first degree because we didn't know how everything went down. We knew that it had gone down, but we didn't know the exact pattern or anything like that, so we weren't going to be able to prove premeditation.
What they did have is the cell phone cord found at Larch Mountain, where Nikki's remains were discovered. The cord was knotted around hair and a piece of bone from Nikki's neck. Prosecutors also knew David's phone had pinged in the same area the morning Nikki was with David. And they had those statements David made in his first police interview about gay and trans people.
Like I said, when I found out that that's who she is, and I don't know how I didn't catch on sooner, but it must have been because I was so drunk, drinking all night, you know, and then when the subject came up somehow, whatever way that was, I just got disgusted and I asked her to just get out. So for me, it's just very disturbing and disgusting when people are like this. I don't know.
All of these pieces helped prosecutors begin to form a picture that this murder was fueled by bias.
And bottom line, you do feel he killed Nikki because she was trans?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So the state added a second charge in the case, something called malicious harassment, which is Washington's hate crime charge.
The man accused of murdering a transgender teen appeared in court today.
A few weeks after David Bogdanov's arrest, he had a hearing to determine whether he would be able to post bail and be released until trial. And things got heated.
Dozens of the victim's supporters, they packed the Clark County courtroom.
The hearing was widely publicized and well attended. More than 100 of Nikki Kuhnhausen's loved ones and supporters lined up outside the Clark County courthouse in the rain. It was late August of 2021. The jury was physically and emotionally exhausted. They had just sat through a week and a half of graphic testimony in the murder trial of David Bogdanov, who had claimed self-defense for strangling Nikki Kuhnhausen. The jurors had listened to almost 40 witnesses testify for hours on end. And now they were in the middle of trying to reach a consensus on a verdict.
It was like we put in all this work. We've sat through this trial for 2 weeks.
Juror number 3, Brittany, went into deliberations with her peers on Wednesday, August 25th. By Thursday, the jurors found themselves deadlocked. Some of them were concerned about potential juror misconduct involving a single juror who the others believed was allowing her own personal bias to interfere with reaching a verdict. and they said she was refusing to deliberate any further.
And emotions were really high at that point. Like, there were tears. I mean, I was more angry than anything because I couldn't understand how this person couldn't see the truth when it was laid right out in front of us.
The presiding juror wrote a letter to the judge asking for the uncooperative juror to be replaced by an alternate.
And we sent a letter to the judge saying that this juror was not budging. They were not changing their mind, and so there was no reason for us to go any further because this person was very adamant about not finding David guilty based on the word intent. She did not think that he intended to kill Nikki.
Finding itself in a predicament, the court took a recess to regroup. Then the judge carefully read through the instructions on deliberations for the jury one more time and sent them back into the jury room with hopes that they would be able to reach a decision. Everyone feared that a hung jury would lead to a mistrial.
You were worried there could be a mistrial.
I was terrified.
They deliberated late into the evening on Thursday, and they broke for the night, still with no consensus.
Did you go home just feeling fried emotionally and just like not knowing what's going to happen the next day?
Oh yeah, like you said, I felt fried. Like my brain was like, I couldn't even like form thoughts at that point because I was just so emotionally exhausted.
But the next morning, when jurors reconvened at the courthouse, the holdout juror announced she'd made a decision.
We went in and we all sat down, and that juror said, I thought about it, I slept on it, and I can confidently say that I feel comfortable writing down a verdict. And so they said, yes, this is my final decision.
David Bogdanov was about to learn his fate, and Nikki Kuhnhausen's family would find out if they'd get justice. I'm Ashley Korsland. You're listening to Should Be Alive, a KGW original podcast. This is episode 6 of 6, Justice for Nikki.
Yeah, I think I was just very close to work about the park, and I think I was coming into the parking lot when I got the call from the judicial assistant that they had a verdict.
Senior Deputy Prosecutor Colin Hayes got the call just before 9 a.m. Friday that he needed to get to the courtroom immediately. Everyone in the room stood up as the jury walked in. Lisa and her advocates held hands as they anxiously awaited the verdict. David Bogdanov stood next to his attorneys, wearing a gray suit and a black mask.
And please be seated in the gallery.
He clutched his hands together in front of him.
We were informed that the jury has now reached a verdict. Mr. Presiding Juror, is that accurate then? Correct, yes. All right, will you please stand?
The presiding juror handed the verdict form to the judge, who read it aloud to the courtroom.
Verdict form count 1, we the jury find the above named defendant guilty of the crime of murder in the second degree as charged in count 1. Verdict form count 2, we the jury find the above named defendant guilty of the crime of malicious harassment as charged in count 2.
The jury found David Bogdanov guilty on both charges, second-degree murder and malicious harassment, Washington's hate crime charge.
And that, in that moment, felt like a little bit of justice and victory.
Have you found forgiveness, or is that something you think you will find?
For David?
Mm-hmm.
I bounce back and forth because of my heart, and forgiveness isn't for him, it's for me. And I don't like walking around with that hatred. It destroys what I'm trying to represent. What I'm trying to represent is Nikki's light, you know, and then her shine. And having that hatred inside me, it really blocks that pathway, you know. So I wouldn't say that I've forgiven him, but I'm working on it.
Have you come to a place where you don't blame yourself anymore?
No.
No. Yeah, I'm sure no matter how many people tell you to not do that and it's not your fault, it's probably hard to get outside of your head with that.
I'm better than I used to be, but
yeah,
it's not completely gone. I'm working on it.
One of the most emotional and candid moments we experienced with Lisa was during our interview. Our producer, Zach, said something to her that touched everyone in the room.
I think it's apparent that the love and acceptance that you gave her since she was born, and just the unconditional love, right? Like, you never questioned her when she would tell you that she was a girl. Growing up, you supported all of it. And I'm very envious of that relationship that you gave. And so as she got older and those tables kind of turned and she was giving you that same kind of, you know, unconditional, unquestioned acceptance and support, I think that it's pretty obvious that your love really rippled out and continues to do so in this community. So, you know, I hope you're proud of what you
Thank you.
helped bring to the world.
Thank you.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was this one time I was really upset, and because, you know, my history isn't that great, but I was really upset, and I called Nikki and I told her that I was sorry, but I needed to cut my face up to match my insides of how much of a bad mother I felt like I hadn't been there. And she said, Mommy, look at me. Can you see me? And we were on the phone, and I said, yes, I see you. She was like, don't you see how beautiful I am? Don't you see how confident I am? And I said, of course. And she said, I would be some scared little gay boy in the corner, not knowing what to do or where to go if it wasn't for your love. And that made me change my heart on how much I didn't love myself, you know. And that was in May, and she was murdered in June.
Everywhere Lisa goes, she wears a special necklace that holds some of Nikki's ashes.
This is Nikki's ashes inside here, and this is my husband's wedding ring. So they're together.
And you wear it every day?
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa also proudly dons a tattoo she got in honor of Nikki.
I have a little tattoo like her. I always kiss it.
Taylor Watts got one too, in the same place Nikki had the exact tattoo.
Nikki had it on her arm, and she got it probably like a year or two before she passed away.
Their tattoo is a semicolon. For some people, it signifies the life of someone who considered suicide and chose not to. For others, a symbol of strength and a permanent reminder that there is more to come in life.
What does your tattoo symbolize?
Like keep going. It's more so like keep going. You know, the story's not over.
Nikki Kuhnhausen would be turning 21 years old in July of 2022. She should be here to celebrate that milestone with her friends. Nikki should have been able to experience a long life full of firsts. Her first love, her first trip to Disneyland, and her first day of work as a professional makeup artist. Nikki Kuhnhausen should be alive. But just like the message behind the semicolon tattoo, Nikki's story isn't over. Her memory and her legacy live on. Thanks for listening to Should Be Alive. This was our final episode.